Hey everybody, this is Tola and I'm going to be giving a little slideshow on a recent trip I took with my son in Iceland, where we went to Snæfellsnes and the Westfjords. This was in July of 2021. This is not intended to be a comprehensive travel guide. If you want that, go buy a Frommer's or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce things in Icelandic, so don't complain or correct me. This is really just intended to be a flavor of Iceland and the potential for traveling to the awesome and infrequently visited northwest corner of Iceland. So, why is this not going forward? A Man, a Plan, a Canal, Iceland. Part 1. An Introduction to Iceland. So, where's Iceland? Well, it's in the North Atlantic, and there's a question on really, is Iceland part of North America or Europe? So the traditional view is that Greenland is part of North America and Iceland is part of Europe. But honestly, that is completely arbitrary. And you could just as easily call Iceland part of North America. But really, the whole concept of Europe, of course, is a fiction because Europe is really just West Asia. But, people want to feel better about themselves, so they gave themselves a continent. But really, that's probably more accurate. So Iceland sits on the mid-Atlantic ridge that is separating. The Atlantic Ocean is getting bigger. The Pacific Ocean is getting smaller. There's actually a place in Iceland where you can dive. There's a lake. And they kind of arbitrarily say, oh, well, it's a North American plate on one side and the European plate on the other. But there's a bunch of places in Iceland where you could make that statement. And it's kind of arbitrary, but, that's fine. It brings the tourists in. Size comparison, Iceland is a little larger than the Republic of Ireland. In fact, if you look at the whole island of Ireland, they're about the same size. Iceland's a little smaller than my beloved state of Washington in the United States. And it is larger than Scotland, but smaller than England, again, for comparison. So Jared Diamond has, in his book Collapse, has an interesting story about the perils of getting too far out beyond your base of resources. And so he talks about the Vikings, and they settled the Orkneys, and they settled the Shetlands, and then the Faroes, and then Iceland, and then Greenland, and they made a stab at North America in Vinland, which is in the northern tip of Newfoundland. And if you look at it, they were progressively less successful colonies. So the Orkneys are about 20 people per square kilometer. The Shetlands are about 15. This is historically. This is, during the period of colonization. The Faroes are at about 10. Iceland was at about 0.5. It's now up to about 2.5. It's still not a densely populated place. Greenland was very, very, very thinly colonized, and then Vinland really wasn't at all. And in fact, the Greenland colony failed. It was around for about 500 years. It was settled around the same time as Iceland, around 1000 AD, more or less. And then about 500 years later, when Europeans started traveling past Greenland, they discovered that there weren't any people left. There weren't any European settlers left. The Inuit, who were around there, didn't really want to talk about it, but it was a failed colony, and the Europeans were gone, and there weren't any Europeans again for a while before Denmark made a claim on Greenland. Speaking of which, in 1523, Denmark and Norway combined, and so Denmark got pretty clear ownership of Iceland. That extended until about 1940, when Denmark was neutral in World War II, but Germany invaded anyhow. And the British decided to preemptively invade Reykjavik and take over Iceland. The Icelanders weren't super happy about it, but what are you going to do? The British had a huge navy. Then in 1941, the English were kind enough to hand Iceland over to the United States, and the United States used Iceland basically as staging for going to Europe. There is an interesting sort of alternative history model that asks, what if England had fallen? And the answer is probably that the United States would have attempted to conduct the war from Iceland, probably would have attempted to invade from Iceland. But of course, Iceland is a lot further away from Nazi Germany than England is. And there's the whole question of what would the English Navy have done. It would have been a bad situation, and good thing we didn't have to find out. Then in 1944, the United States handed Iceland back to Iceland, and there was much rejoicing. And that was the last time that the United States ever considered having an Arctic colony and taking it away from Denmark. So flash forward a little bit into the 1960s, Icelandair came up with the idea of using the fact that what might have been viewed as a minus, which is all flights for Icelandair transited to and from the Keflavik International Airport. They decided to make that a plus and encourage people to start staying over in Iceland as they came through from North America to Europe and vice versa. That really took off after the Icelandic financial meltdown of 2008. What happened was there was basically a giant Ponzi scheme, and tons of Icelanders and Europeans lost lots and lots and lots of money. It severely damaged the Icelandic currency, and the krona all of a sudden became worth a lot less, which was really nice if you wanted to start up a tourism business. So Icelandair really pushed hard on this stay-over policy. They said, yeah, come to Iceland. If you're transiting through, you can stay for a few days free of charge, which really is no big... I mean, it's not a particularly... it's just basically saying you're free to leave the airport, right? And basically saying that if you want to transit for more than a few hours... it's no skin off Icelandair's back, right? But it was brilliantly successful, and they went from approximately 500,000 visitors per year to monster numbers, 2.5 million roughly. So, 8 to 10,000 people a day coming in through Keflavik International Airport. So it's just been this model success for tourism globally. Everybody admires the success. It's brought some real challenges to Iceland. I would say, this was our third trip to Iceland, and I would say Icelanders seem a little ambivalent. They love showing off their country. They're fiercely proud of it. But it's a lot of tourists, right? If there are 2.5 million people who visit per year and there's only 350,000 people, actual Icelanders living in Iceland, and somebody told me that there's more people of Icelandic descent elsewhere than there are Icelanders living in Iceland. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds reasonable. But anyhow, there's a lot of tourists, particularly in summer. So when you put it all together, the big picture is that there's about 285,000 people in the greater Reykjavik area. There's about 80,000 in the whole rest of the country. 20,000 of those are in Akureyri. A couple thousand are in Ísafjörður, which is the sort of regional capital in the northwest, and we'll talk more about Ísafjörður in a little bit. The airport, I put a little scratching of there's a little plane symbol there in the lower left-hand corner. That's Keflavik International Airport. There's also Reykjavik Airport, but Reykjavik Airport is actually the domestic airport. So it's the airport just for flights within the nation. All the international flights go through Keflavik. And the currently erupting volcano is only a few kilometers away from the airport. On a good day, on a clear day, you can actually see eruptive clouds from the airport. It's that close. When you consider going to visit Iceland, you really want to know a couple of things. First off, the vast majority of tourists spend almost all their time in Reykjavik and in the surrounding what's called the Golden Circle. And the Golden Circle is this tourist loop that got created a long time ago. It's got geyser, the original geyser from which the name of the phenomena comes from, the geyser in Iceland, a recurring eruptive hot water jet that comes out of the ground, kind of like Old Faithful, bigger but less frequent than Old Faithful. There's also Gullfoss, Gold Falls, which is a particularly scenic waterfall, not the biggest waterfall in Iceland, but a really nice waterfall. And it's just hard to overstate. The vast, vast majority of tourists spend their time in southwest Iceland. The next biggest tourist draw is the Ring Road, which is the 1,300-kilometer road that runs around the perimeter of Iceland. And my son and I did that in the winter of 2018, and that was a lot of fun. That's still fairly crowded, and by Icelandic standards, it's crowded. By North American standards, it's not crowded at all. It's just if you want to go someplace away from the crowds, there are still crowds on places on the Ring Road. So what the Icelandic government has done is recently introduced a couple of new loops. They've got Ring Road 2 is what they're calling it. It's got Westfjorden, I don't know. There's a term in Icelandic for it. It's the intent to make a ring in the Westfjords in the northwest. It doesn't really work yet. There's some new tunnels. There's a bunch of tunnels in Iceland, but there's new tunnels that they've built. There's still some high passes that you have to cross. You still can't get through in winter. Travel by tourists is not recommended in the Westfjords in winter. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. So that loop is getting started. I would say Icelanders are a little more ambivalent about these places that are historically don't have a lot of foreign tourists that are now going to start getting more tourists. But the idea is it'll take some of the pressure off of the Golden Circle and off of the Ring Road. And then there's also this thing called the Diamond Circle in the northeast, and that's where the two biggest waterfalls in Europe are located, Dettifoss and the other one that I can't remember, but they're huge. It's also got the town of Husavik, which Husavik kind of won the International Tourism Lottery when that Will Ferrell movie came out a few months ago, and Husavik was the town where it was filmed. Husavik, honestly, it looks a lot like a lot of other Icelandic towns, but fine. It's nice for them. They seem to be nice folks, but there's no particular reason to go to Husavik as compared to any other northern Icelandic town. I've spent time in Siglufjordur, for instance, which is not far away, which is a totally beautiful town on its own fjord, similar to Husavik. So make of that what you will. But I would heartily encourage people to think about traveling beyond the Golden Circle, beyond the Ring Road, because you will just get less crowded visions of Iceland. But of course, if we all do that, then the whole rest of the country will get crowded too. And therein lies the challenge. Iceland is really expensive, even with a krona that's relatively inexpensive. Like all of Scandinavia, it's not expensive to get there, but it's expensive to eat there and sleep there and do anything that you want to do there. So camping is one option. Show their picture in the lower left. Some people like to camp. You're going to need a vehicle. Mass transit outside of the greater Reykjavik area is not reliable. A lot of these smaller towns are only served by buses once or twice a week. So you're not going to take a bus around the country. So that's that. One of the things you can do, so when you think about camping, a thing to be aware of is Iceland loves swimming pools. And they have swimming pools and they have what are called hot pots. And we'll talk about those in a little bit. But this picture on the left is from my Kortabók, which is the map book of Iceland. And it's just a picture of the swimming pools. And you think, okay, there's 360,000 people and something like 200 swimming pools, or I think it's swimming pools plus hot pots. So this is just the true swimming pools that they have. So it's just, Icelanders love their swimming pools. You have to be real careful. They want everyone to be very clean. So there's these really funny videos that you can see online that talk about how to get clean. You need to take off your swimsuit, scrub down buck naked. They've got helpful pictograms on the wall of the bits that you should really make sure to get clean, the obvious ones you can imagine. But they're really serious about it, and you'll be denied using the pool if they think that you're not thoroughly clean. So just get clean. Get naked in the shower area, and then you can put your swimsuit back on. You can go out and go swimming or use the hot pots. So this book, I've got a picture in the lower right-hand corner. I guess I have it. Yeah, I've got it in the next slide too. Thermal pools of Iceland. So let me just explain. There's swimming pools and there's hot pots, and they're all generally heated by hot water that comes out of the ground. One of the nice things about being in a geothermally active area is there's hot water lots and lots of places. And so this is a highlight of two of my favorite ways to take a dip in Iceland, and they're actually really close to each other. The picture in the upper left is Grettislag, which is across a fjord from the town of Hofsós. So Grettislag is a naturally occurring heated pool of water, and it's called Grettislag because there's a guy named Grettir, and about 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago, he actually swam from an island that was in the fjord, something like 4 kilometers in winter, and then got to Greteslag and got into the warm water and warmed himself up back that way. So that's why it was named after him. And it's really charming. And then you can see they've got little rocks there. And but it comes from hot water that comes out of the ground. Then across the fjord in Hofsos is this beautiful swimming pool. And it's basically an infinity pool. And you can see it's on the fjord. And it actually looks out across. If you had a pair of binoculars, you would be able to see Greteslag from the Hofsos swimming pool. But it's funny because in Reykjavik, they just spent a lot of money to create a big new infinity pool as a tourist attraction. But this little town of Hofsos has just as nice of a swimming pool, to my way of thinking. And it's heated to like 98 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Body temperatures. And it's because why not? You've got infinite amounts of hot water coming out of the ground. So why not heat your outdoor pool as hot as you want it? And what you can't see in this picture is there's a couple of basically jacuzzis just outside of frame, which are even hotter, like 104 or 105 Fahrenheit. So, so there's lots of good options if you're going to go. If you're going to go camping, you can think about a combination of camping and using swimming pools. That would be the less expensive way to get around. But as I said, you still need a car. And one of the things to think about with a car is these F roads. So the F roads, F stands for Highlands. I don't know the word in Icelandic, but the F roads are only to be driven in four-wheel drive vehicles. Some of the F roads are pretty easy. You'll see in the upper left F66 and F570. We drove those on the most recent trip. There's some roads that are more hazardous. You can see in the main part of the island. One of the things you want to be really careful about is you can rent a four-wheel drive car that's pretty small. The vehicle that we saw a lot of was the Dacia Duster, which I believe is a four-wheel drive vehicle. But the thing is, you don't want to take a little low-slung, basically, sports sedan four-wheel drive on these highland roads. Some of them can be quite deep. And you can see a picture there in the middle of a car that made an ill-advised crossing attempt. Usually, when you read about these things, you find out that it's somebody who didn't follow the intended line. The Icelandic government maintains these F-roads, and they have staked out routes that they recommend that you drive, and they also have information on a daily basis about the conditions of the roads, and somebody just wasn't following good advice, and so they got Hydrolock on their car, which is, they're going to spend a lot of money fixing that, because the general atmosphere in Iceland is they kind of let you do what you want, but you need to understand that if you don't follow the rules, or if you go in the backcountry, you're going to pay for any problems that you have. So, you take your four-wheel drive on some of these back roads, and you take one of these low-slung cars through a deep river, and if it breaks, it's up to you. You're gonna have a large bill. So we actually had a Toyota Land Cruiser with a snorkel kit. So we were good for pretty deep water. We actually didn't, on F66 and F570, we didn't see deep water, but we were more ready for it than we would have been in a low-slung car. So do consider, if you're going to go to the F roads, and some of them are just drop dead gorgeous, and we did F35 the last time we came through, which is a relatively easy F road through some of the backcountry. It's well worth it, but you need to make sure you have the right car, is the punchline. So on our trip, we went from Keflavik Airport down to the volcano, then up to Snæfellsnes, which is a peninsula only about 2 hours north of Reykjavik. And people call it Iceland in miniature because it's got a lot of the stuff that would want to see elsewhere in Iceland, but all in a much more contained area. And then we so we did 2 nights there, and then we did 5 nights in the Westfjords. And the Westfjords are much, much more remote from Reykjavik. It's more like 5 to 6 hours to get anywhere interesting in the Westfjords. And much less crowded. Like I said, a total of 7,000 people in the Westfjords, a couple thousand in Isafjordur. And so we went out to the westernmost spot in Iceland, Hvalatur, and we also went up an area called the Strander on the northeast side of the Westfjords, up to this beautiful pool called Krosneslag, which I'll show some pictures of in a little bit. So the next section, let's talk about the volcano, and it's got various names. Gallingadalur is reasonably pronounceable. Icelandic volcanoes are famously not unpronounceable for non-Icelanders. So this is like your standard photo that you'll find anywhere about the volcano. But we didn't. This is not a picture I took. When the day that we were there, what happened was things were very overcast. Even in summer, Iceland is often overcast because of North Atlantic. What are they called? North Atlantic gales when it gets windy. And so clouds topped out about 300 meters. So this is and again, I'm going to butcher the name. My apologies. Nathagi Valley. So this is the lower valley that has been slowly filling up. Right now, I don't think it's filling up. The lava is going elsewhere. But this is the valley that when this overtops, I'm standing on top of an earthen berm. And you can see my son in the picture in the lower right-hand corner. He's standing in front of the berm. So the lava is about 20 feet below that berm. And when it goes over that berm, there's yet another valley, but basically that next valley will get filled quickly, and then the lava will get to the ocean. And then it'll be very different, right? Then it'll be more like Kilauea, where you have lava coming into the ocean and you can approach it from the west or you can approach it from the east, but you won't be able to get this kind of close to the lava when that happens. So if you're going to go see this volcano, now is probably a good time to go. So this is probably only 50 meters above sea level where we are right here. And you can see that ridge up and to the right extends up into the clouds, which means that it was not a good day to go up and see the actual volcano up at the summit, which is, I think, 500 or 600 meters up. So we did not attempt to go up to see the main summit volcano. We just stayed down here and checked out this valley that was slowly but surely filling up with lava. And here is a picture or a little bit of video showing the smoke coming out of basically skylights in the lava. And you would occasionally see idiots walking through. Whoops. Let's do there one more time. You'd see idiots walking out on the lava. That's a really, really terrible idea. No one's been killed yet, but only because you don't see a lot of people walking out on the lava. Don't walk out on the lava. It's a bad idea. There's T-shirts that say "Don't walk on the lava" now. Again, the Icelanders, they don't have cops everywhere. They're not nobody's gonna run up to you and tell you to get off the lava. They're just, it's a bad situation, so don't do it. Snæfellsnes, this is this peninsula I mentioned, the one that's fairly close. So what I did here is I did the route out in the colors of the rainbow, Roji Biv. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So you can see the course of our route over a couple days. We came in from the south, stayed in Grundarfjordur, which is a charming town, sort of mid-peninsula on the north side. Then we drove out and went on the F570 road up the backside of Snæfellsnes. Aiden tells me is the way to pronounce it. The volcano which has a Snæfellsnes is actually, I think, the glacier on top of the volcano. But we drove up very, very close to the glacier and got pretty close to the summit on this F570. Then we drove around, went to see a cool cave, then came back along, went back to the town where we were staying, Grundarfjordur, and then went out and slowly made our way out towards the Westfjords. And so here is a picture coming into Grundarfjordur. This is the north shore of Snæfellsnes. And this is a very, very famous picture. So this is Kirkjufell Mountain with Kirkjufell Foss, which is the waterfall in the foreground. Foss means waterfall. And this picture, I swear to God, is on about half the magnets in Iceland. So if you go to Iceland, you buy a magnet in the shop. Chances are one of the magnets you can buy has this very picture on it. And certainly it's scenic, but there's lots of scenic mountains and lots of scenic waterfalls in Iceland. So it's interesting, 10 months of the year, you're trying to keep your homes warm, right? Most of Iceland stays a little bit above freezing most of the time. In winter, it's just above freezing at sea level. In summer, it's like 10 degrees Celsius, 15 degrees Celsius, maybe 20 degrees Celsius on a good day. So what happens is you get an interesting problem. So this was our hotel room. That's the town of Grundarfjordur in the distance. Kirkjufell in the upper right, looking a different view of it. And you think, oh, great, gorgeous view. But the problem was there's 20 hours of sunlight per day. So a couple hours after this picture was taken, the sun now, and this is a western exposure, this view. So the sun is shining directly on these windows. And at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, because we were really tired, we put down the blackout curtains. And now you've got, 3 meters by 3 meters of black fabric taking direct sunlight. And there was a tiny little window that opened up, which, 10 months of the year, a tiny little window is fine. But the punchline is it got really hot. It got about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius, something like that. It was really hot in our room, and we couldn't get it cooled off. And there's no air conditioning. Almost everybody in Iceland, their heating is radiative, because, again, free hot water everywhere. So we had a perennial problem on our trip staying cool, because it wasn't that hot outside, but anywhere where you had big windows and a western exposure, or an eastern exposure, frankly, anything other than a northern exposure, would heat up during the day. And the bigger the windows, the bigger the problem. And we did experience that. So this is Snæfellsnes. This is the F570 road leading up to the backside. That's a glacier up at the top. That volcano is famous because in the Jules Verne story, Journey to the Center of the Earth, it's where the explorers enter the cave system that takes them deep into the earth. So this is a pretty twin waterfall. There were just gorgeous waterfalls everywhere in Iceland. I don't mean to be blasé about it, but you do at some point, you're like, oh, okay, more waterfalls. So it's gorgeous, and it's really nice, but there's just so many. I mean, you would literally see 20 waterfalls a day or 30 waterfalls a day. But this is a particularly pretty one. Now we're further up on the volcano. Oh, and by the way, Snæfellsnes is a dormant volcano, but it's not an extinct volcano. So we're high up on it. We're probably 500 meters up the side of a 2,500... No, we're 700 meters up the side of a 1,200 meter volcano, roughly. I think that was about it. So this is a view from our car. Yeah, 2,500 feet looking up to 4,700 feet. So yeah, 700 meters looking up to 1,200 meters, 1,400 meters. I don't know, something like that. Anyhow, you can see the true summit on the right, another volcanic plug on the left. There you have it. So then we went to this Vatnskeller lava tube cave. So the volcano, when it would erupt, the way these shield volcanoes work is they erupt sort of below the surface, and they have these volcanic highways, if you will. They have these lava tubes that form, and the lava will stay very, very hot as it moves, 5-10 kilometers out from the summit. And this is one of those tubes that when the lava drained out, the tube drained out. And so these kind of tubes are occurring right now on Glingda, whatchamacallit, on the south end of the island, is building these kind of volcanic tubes right now. But we got to see an old one that's no longer filled with lava. So there's a picture of the inside of it. There were staircases to take us down into these tubes. So it was a lot of fun. So then we started the drive on to the Westfjords, and again, it's almost embarrassing like how beautiful Iceland is. This was a little canyon that we came across, and it's like 20 meters deep, 60 feet, and Aiden climbed down near to the water. That's my son in this picture. And I tried to find the name of this little canyon, and I couldn't find it. It isn't even named. There's so many gorgeous little canyons. Like, this would be a state park if it was in the United States. But it's just one of many, many, many canyons that occur in this country. And so we took some pictures, and then we moved on. We got where we were going. This is a very typical swimming pool. So this is geothermally heated. There's a couple of basically... portable trailer type structures. One is the utility building. The other has the men's and the women's changing and shower rooms. So again, you have to scrub down, get really clean, and then you come out and you have this nice pool. There's also a hot pot beyond the swimming pool. Interestingly enough, the hot pot is completely naturally heated and it's not as warm as the swimming pool. Somehow the swimming pool's been optimized to be warmer. The hot pot's like 95, 98. The swimming pool is like 102, 103 maybe Fahrenheit. So it was nice. And it's a floodplain out beyond there and the ocean beyond that. So into the Westfjords, here's the route that we took in the Westfjords. We ran along the south shore. The Westfjords, as advertised, have lots of fjords, nicely enough. And so we went we stayed out near the southwest corner of the island. Then we went out to a point, I'll mention it later, that's the westernmost point in Iceland, which is arguably the westernmost point in Europe. Then we came back to where we were staying and then drove north and went up to Isafjordur in the north, and then more fjords, lots and lots of fjords, and then came back across the F66 Highlands Road to the south shore, and then back up to this town called Drangsnes, which is in sort of the southwest corner of the Westfjords. And then the last full day that we were in the Westfjords, we drove up the purple dashed line there, shows you up to Krasneslag, which is the swimming pool I mentioned. It's an incredibly gorgeous coast. There's 70 people. It's 100 kilometers long, 70 people on 100 kilometers. It's where they sent the witches when anybody was accused of witchcraft back in the day. They were exiled to the Strandir coast, which is sort of an interesting history to have. Usually it was because you were politically unpopular and somebody decided you were a witch. I'll also mention here, I put some question marks and exclamation points on one stretch of the road. I should say, I forgot to mention in the earlier picture, where I put dotted lines is the bit that is dirt road or 4x4 trail. So this loop, this Route 2, this northwest the Westfjords loop is really not done, because the bit in blue where I have the question marks and the exclamation points is really pretty rough country. It's high up, it's 300 to 500 meters above sea level, and in a nation where sea level stays just above freezing, it means that the high country has lots of snow. There's not a lot of snow right this very minute. There's just patches of snow, but it's really it's not. You wouldn't want to take your little two-wheel drive Volkswagen sedan through this area, and so they're still working on this Westfjords loop. I don't think it's as tourist friendly as they think it is. So this is Patreksfjordur, which is one of the fjords on the very, very southwest, and you can see the picture at the bottom is one of the peninsulas with its own fjords. There's fjords on fjords on fjords in the Westfjords. And so these are little mini pocket fjords that are sticking out of this main fjord. This is Gardar, the oldest steel ship in Iceland. It was beached in, I think, 1981. It was built in Norway in 1912, and it was a combination of steam and sail. But it was, like I said, beached in 81 and left to decompose, basically. It makes for a nice set of pictures right at the head of Patreksfjordur. My son and I, this is Latrabjarg, which is the largest bird cliff in Europe. So it's 440 meters tall and 14 kilometers long, which is really immense. Like, we've been to the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland, which are justly famous, and those are about 100 meters tall. So the idea of cliffs that are 440 meters tall is really staggering, right? That's a very tall set of cliffs indeed. And there were indeed lots of birds, as advertised. The birds love this remote country where their predators can't get to them. And again, this is the point near here is the westernmost point in all of Europe, if you don't count the Canary Islands. Museums, Icelanders love their museums. They are very proud of their history. There's something like 200 museums in Iceland, and there's even a museum devoted to aquatic animal penises, all the penises of all the fish and mammals that live in the sea. It's a museum in Reykjavik. We did not get to it, but it's there for people who want that. This was just a general museum. This was Hnjótur Museum, again in the southwest corner of the Westfjords, really highlighting fishing and small village life in rural Iceland for the last 500 years. I got a kick out of this. This is past and present Brennivinn. Brennivinn is a form of akavit, basically. It uses caraway. You can think of it as gin, in some senses gin, except using caraway instead of juniper, and so it gives a more herb taste rather than a sort of pine forest kind of a taste the way gin does. But this is an old bottle of Brennivinn in the museum on the left, and the bottle on the right is a special cask selection of Brennivinn that I like so much I bought and brought home, and boy is it tasty. And Brennivinn means fire wine. It has to do with how spirits were distilled back in the day, but they had to have black and white labels. They basically they made Brennivinn, but they didn't want people to drink it very much, so they had to basically it was supposed to be bad for you, and so they said you had to have black and white labels, and that's why to this day people still use black and white labels, or in this case black and gold labels for Brennivinn. But it's delicious, and I heartily recommend it. So this is Dinjandi, is an amazing set of waterfalls. So you'll see the main waterfall in just a minute, but these are the 5 waterfalls below the main waterfall. So these are all named waterfalls, and they're on the same river. And as you climb up to the main waterfall, you go past these, and each of these on their own would be a nice tourist destination. And then you put them together, and you get this above the others. And you can see a person in the lower right-hand corner for a size comparison. So this gives you an idea. The main waterfall is about 100 meters tall. So this waterfall you're seeing in front of you is 100 meters, and then the waterfalls that were below it extend another, we were at this point a couple 150 maybe meters up from sea level. So it's really an unbelievably beautiful waterfall. Now, I've been told that it can be crowded here. What I didn't take a picture of was there were 18 cars in the parking lot. And I've had a friend of mine told me that he was there and there were like 8 tour buses. It was just mobbed with people. But I mean, I was there in July on a nice day and there were only 18 cars. So I would say in general, we found the Westfjords to be not very crowded. We've now driven up towards Ísafjörður, again, the regional capital. And this is one of the little, I don't want to say suburbs, but there's a series of tunnels that extend from Ísafjörður back to these more remote fjords. And this is Bolungarvík. And I took this picture because they built huge ramparts to basically protect the town from snow avalanches. So this is on the edge of town, and what you can't see is to the left there's like a 500-meter tall fjord wall. And so there's a couple of these giant ramparts, and they're basically there so that if snow sheds down off the fjord wall, it doesn't travel into town and damage any houses. This is a view looking northeast to the Hornstradr Glacier, which is it's hard to see, but it's back up there in the high country. It's the only glacier in the Westfjords. This is a picture from my drone. So I took my drone with me, and this is the beginnings of climbing one of the fjord walls. Most of the fjords were 400 to 500 meters tall, and so this is just showing all the various little cascades of this waterfall. And again, you'd see like 20 waterfalls per day. So, I could have spent all day, every day taking pictures of these various waterfalls, and some of them were bigger and more impressive. But I thought I'd take a representative example. So these are just they're just everywhere. Then we got into Ísafjörður. It was a bit of a shock after being in very, very rural towns. Most of the towns we went through had like a grocery store and a couple of restaurants. And the grocery store was open, 10 to 5 every day, kind of a thing. And then we get into Isafjordur, and including suburbs, it's like 3,000, 3,500 people, and has a real downtown, and not really our cup of tea, but if you want to get stuff, they have a little college there, and so on and so forth. Then we got back to the probably the most serious of the F roads that we took. I think it was the F66 through central Westfjords, and we had a couple of small river crossings. I mean, I would say they were only 15 to 25 centimeters, so 8 to 16 inches deep water. Nothing that had any danger involved in it, or even any particular stress involved with it. Like I said, there are much larger water crossings further into the main part of the island. To let my son drive up on one of the ridges, but unfortunately it was fogged in. A lot of days were fogged in up in the high country. There are sheep everywhere. The sheep, again, the Icelanders. Here's an example of how the Icelanders are just sort of chill about everything. They don't put up giant fences everywhere, but if you hit a sheep, you are responsible for finding and paying the owner restitution. So they're not gonna mar the view everywhere with giant fences and whatnot, but you're responsible for yourself. Don't hit any sheep. Slow down if you see sheep ahead of you. Just don't be stupid. That should be the bumper sticker in Iceland. Welcome to Iceland. Don't be stupid. I took this picture because I was annoyed. I used to do motorcycle touring. These 4 motorcycles took up the entire parking lot, so they could show off their 4 bikes. But they all had the exact same kit, even though they were 4 separate bikes, which means they were doing some part of a tour, where the tour provider provided the tour bags for everything. So, plus 5 points. Yep, there's 4 of you out motorcycling. Minus 20 points because you all just paid a tour operator. Picture of my son in front of the Camber Mountain. We are now on the Strandir coast that I talk about, 70 people over 100 kilometers. It was just staggeringly beautiful coast, full of fjords, just really gorgeous. We did find, it was interesting, we saw beaches with deadwood or driftwood, and the interesting thing is there's very few trees in Iceland. There's only a couple small patches, like maybe 1% of the island has trees on it, maybe even less. And so we found out that most of the driftwood on the beaches in Iceland actually comes from the Yenisei River in Russia, 4,000 kilometers away. So Siberia is so massive that lots and lots of trees wind up floating down and out the Yenisei River delta. And Arctic currents being what they are, they wind up on the shore of Iceland, and you can professional, tree guys, they can figure out where the trees come from, and these come from the Yenisei. So here's a map of the end of the Strandir Road with just a few businesses and a few houses that are out there. Individual houses are named in Iceland when you're out in the rural countryside, and oftentimes there are Icelandic saga stories that'll say, so-and-so put his axe into the head of so-and-so at this location, and those locations still have houses on them. They're not obviously the original houses, but so it's a compact little community out there at the end of the road in the middle of nowhere. So this is this Kronoslag swimming pool, and just really loved it. It's also geothermally heated. You can see I took both of these pictures. So they built it really as a tourist destination. There's a little restaurant about a kilometer up the road, but also as a place for locals to go swimming, so that the kids can stretch their legs in the middle of winter and have someplace warm but outdoors. And it was just really lovely. It was a nice warm day and sunny, and no complaints, but it was well worth the 2-hour drive each way to get out to the Kronoslag. Here's a picture back along the Strandir coast, showing a set of the mountains. Here again, it's a fjord that's got fjords within the fjord. So each of these mountains basically sits at the entrance of a fjord, and you have to drive up and into those fjords and around them each and every time. But it was just gorgeous. And, at some point after a week of giant mountains and giant fjords and giant waterfalls. You just kind of like, okay, I have now seen lots and lots of mountains and waterfalls and fjords. And it's not that they aren't still beautiful. And this one still wowed me. Even after a week in Iceland, I got to this point and I was like, I must take this picture. But all things must end. So at the end of the trip, we had to go to the main Icelandic public health facility and get COVID tested. They had a line for the PCR testing, and they had a line for the quick antigen tests. And we were lucky. We were able at the time that we flew out, we were able to do the antigen test. So we did same day of flight, and an hour later we had our certificate of having tested negative for COVID. But if you're considering going, and if you're watching this video and COVID is still a thing, check both with US and Icelandic rules in terms of testing, because they change all the time. And as I'm recording this video, Delta is spooling up. And so now the Icelandic government has just said that no matter what your vaccination status, if you're coming from the US, you have to be tested before you arrive. So you have to be tested coming in, and you have to be tested coming out. But hopefully by the time people are watching this video, COVID will no longer be a big thing, and you won't have to worry about it. But you should get checked anyhow. And that's it. Thank you for watching my video, and have a great day.